Hey guys, Chris Adams with the RVA Returners back again for another episode of Change My Mind. And before we get started on this one, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to watch the first episode, which was about Lon. And I'll honestly say you guys have done a good job of changing my mind. I've really come around on the card. I think he is, the good points that I had definitely hold sway, and I think I was a little more harsh on the card than I should have been. But I think the card is a legit threat, and I hope to see him, get more support moving forward, and we'll see if he can become like a major player as far as fire decks go or X-Fire decks go. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the next episode, which is about a card that's equally as polarizing, and people have been pretty hard on this one too, not just myself. And of course, I am talking about the Opus 7 Lightning Legendary, Noel. Alright guys, so before we start actually breaking down Noel and start talking about the good and the bad, let's actually read the card and see what he does and what he's all about. So, he is a 6 CP Lightning forward, job is Commando, he's a category 13. He has haste. When Noel enters the field until the end of turn, Noel gains 3,000 power, and when Noel deals damage to your opponent, choose one for an opponent controls and break it. And of course he has a base of 6k. Now the card reads okay, but let's go ahead and dive into, there's definitely some good and there's definitely some bad here. So what we'll do is we'll start out on the good foot. We'll talk about what the card does well, and then we'll kind of start breaking down, some of the negative aspects of the card. Then I'll give you my opinion on it, and then we'll go from there. All right, so let's start with the positives. At first glance, you'll notice Noel has haste, which is always a solid keyword to have. The fact that, by playing him, you're always threatening pressure and damage at any point in the game. The fact that he's even costed is always good, meaning you can play him off of 4 backups, you can play him off of 2. You could pitch 3 from your hand to play him, and that way, you're not overpaying for him in any one of these scenarios. And he's also removal. He's a forward that has to kind of be respected once he hits the board, especially if your opponent has overextended, or if you, the player facing it down, has overextended. Another positive is he almost acts like Edia's 4 through 6, which I'll kind of explain later in the video. But overall, he's got some decent things. He is a very lightning type of card, if that makes sense. But he does have a lot holding him back, and we'll talk about that too. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the negatives. There actually aren't many of them. I would really only say he has 2 negatives, but they're pretty glaring. The big one being the fact that there's that window to respond to his enter the field trigger. Whereas he comes in as a natural 6,000 power body, 7 at the most if you have Lulu out. And that just really makes him susceptible to pretty much any piece of removal in the game. And that's going to cost your opponent a lot less than 6 CP, which is what you've ended up paying for the forward. And the other one really being that if you don't time this card correctly, you will just put yourself so far behind. So, again, with that being said, I do think there is some merit to the card, but I'll go ahead and weigh in with my personal opinion here. Alright, so what do I think of the card? Well, as the name of the video series suggests, I'm not really a fan. While there aren't as many negative aspects to the card as there are positive, I just do think the negatives are just too crippling. Like I said, the fact that, he's just susceptible to almost every piece of removal in the game, that's going to cost your opponent a lot less than 6 to deal with him before you can really get that value out of him. I'd much rather just do what mono lightning decks want to do, and that's get to 4 or 5 backups and then just really get the value out of your just better, higher curve forwards like Estinian and Adia that just really, really can punish your opponent properly at those higher backup counts. Now, with that being said, one of the things I do like about Noel, and I think it's probably his best quality, is that he can be played early, and like I said earlier, he can act like a DS 4 through 6 when you start playing him off of 2 backups. So the fact that he can come in that early, your opponent may have swung with a point of damage with a forward, and then you can play this guy, boom, break the forward that they played earlier. So he can be a more early to mid game threat, whereas cards like Adia are mid-late to late game threats. So there is some going for him. I just don't really see him being a continuous like impact player in mono lightning lists. But again, that's the whole point of these videos. You know, if you guys out there love playing the card, you know, please change my mind on this one. I do think he has some upside. I really genuinely do, but I just think the fact that he comes in at such a small body with just all of this efficient removal out there, that it just doesn't really make it worth it. Though some could argue that really at the end of the day, one way or another, he's costing you something, either a forward on board or a card in hand to get rid of. So maybe at the end of the day that is worth it, but you guys sound off. Let me know what you think. And I'm going to finish off here with a list from Matt Rice that he played in the Fanfare 3v3 alongside Steven Arboleta and Alex Ziegenhurt. All right, now like I said, here's that mono lightning list that Matt Rice was playing. It's running 2 copies of Noel, as well as a kind of a toolboxed top end here. He can use Estinian Emperor and Adia to punish you in the late game, and Noel kind of comes down, especially after an early Sid Previa, into any one of your searcher backups. So this deck just runs really quick, really effective forwards that can be useful at any point in the game, and Noel is just kind of essentially an extra piece of removal in this. So here's the list. Give it a shot. Let me know what you think, and as always, thank you for watching.